righty. Thank you, everyone who sent us get well wishes. We appreciate that. It was kind of a tough week. It had its ups and downs, but overall, I think we're on the mend now and back on the right track. So we appreciate that. I don't know what it was, some kind of a summer cold or flu or bug or something, but I'm glad it's gone. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking this time this day to come together. And the title of the talk this morning is, Oh God, it's good. It's good. All capital letters, good. We're shouting it out. It's good. It's good. And the reason for that is as I went through this experience of the last week of health and the issues with problems we were having with the plumbing and all that, it became very obvious to me that when things are working okay, we really don't pay a whole lot of attention to them. But boy, the minute that they stop working, they get our full attention. It's like our psyche and our minds is trained to go to what is not working and to just take what is working for granted. And you can see a perfect example of this anytime the power goes out, especially if you're in a house with a well, because when the power goes out, the water goes out too. But when the power goes out, you go around from room to room and you're turning on the light switch, and you know darn well that the power's out, you know. You understand that the power is out, but you can't help yourself. If you go from one room to the other, it seems like the first thing you're going to do is reach out there and flip that switch and then stand there in amazement when the light doesn't come on and go, oh, for crying out loud, the power is out. We become so accustomed to things working as they should that we really never give them much thought. You know, we don't stop every time we turn on the light and go, wow, isn't that wonderful? You know, isn't that wonderful? We don't have to light the candle. We don't have to clean the lantern. You know, we don't have to carry the oil in and have smelly, dirty, and dangerous oil stored all over the house. All we have to do is go over and flip the switch. And wow, isn't that good? Isn't that good? But how often do we stop and think about that? Isn't that good? You know, when the power bill comes in, can you put a little smiley face on the corner of your check and write, isn't that good next to it? You know, thank you to the power company. Isn't that good? You know, the food that gets cooked by the electricity in the microwaves, isn't that good? Isn't that good? And the plumbing as well. You know, if the well is out with the power, you go into the rooms that have a tap and you turn the faucet and you expect water to come out. And it doesn't. You stop, what's wrong? You know, oh, the power's out. We have no water. But how many times has that tap worked? How many times have we gone over and made our demand on the well, if you want to put it in those terms? But we complied with the law of hydrodynamics and we opened the valve. And when we opened the valve, the water came through. And it came through, and did we stop to appreciate it? Did we stop to say, wow, isn't that good? Isn't that good? You know, we're not going out to the well with a bucket. We're not going down to the river with big drums and trying to gather up water. You know, we just go right over to the kitchen sink and we turn the tap. And when we want clean water, there it is. Whether it be to cook, whether it be to wash our dishes, it's there. And isn't that good? So my point is that we take things for granted. I know I certainly do, and I think it's human nature that we do that. And we want to make it a spiritual practice, a conscious, deliberate practice, if you will. To call it a practice, we want to require ourselves, we want to train ourselves, to discipline ourselves to see the good that's already there. The good is there. The good exists. It is already there. And yet we're looking at it and we're looking past it. We're looking through it. We're kind of just taking it for granted as we look around. And what we're doing is we're looking for what's wrong. We're trying to save our attention, if you will, to focus our attention on things that aren't working. Now, biologically, from the point of view of evolution, you can say, well, that makes good sense, because if we were out in a dangerous environment, if we were living in a jungle, for example, and there were animals there that might be a danger to us, all those kind of things, you need to be alert. You need to be aware. You need to be paying attention. So it's as if our consciousness developed an efficiency of, if it's working okay, don't give it any time or attention. It doesn't need your time or attention. It's working okay just as it is. Now mind you, okay is, is kind of subjective, but we've accepted it as okay. We're not thinking about making it any better. We're just accepting as it is as being okay. And then we go around and we focus on where the danger might be. And that is the way that it seems that our society has evolved, that is the way that perhaps our brains have evolved. That is certainly the way that our consciousness has evolved, that we go through life not really giving much attention to that which is really good, that which is working okay, that which is in itself really a miracle, I mean, think about all the different time traveler movies that they've had, the science fiction movies where people move back and forth in time. And can you imagine somebody from 400 or 500 years ago suddenly finding themselves transplanted into today's world, and what they would look around and what they would think would be a miracle, that you could actually travel 60 miles in 1 hour, a trip that might have taken a week on foot. In 1 hour you can travel. You can cross the ocean in a few hours. We can grow all of the food that we need with a very little percent of our population. Look at the percent of the population that was engaged in agriculture when Thomas Jefferson was president, and look at the percentage of population that is engaged in agriculture now. And it's incredible. It's incredible how few people produce all of our food. And if somebody came into this experience, if they just kind of stepped into this experience without having been born into it, without having kind of been able to look around and just say, okay, well, that's normal, that's good, I accept that, now let's see what's wrong, let's see where our attention needs to go. If they came in without having been conditioned to accept these things as being things that ought to be, I think they would see the good. They would be able to point out to us good that we have learned to overlook, that we have learned to ignore. The simple things, the simple things that we might take for granted. We go for a ride in our car and we go over a bridge, over a creek or over a river or over a great body of water. And years ago, those were tremendous obstacles to travel. If you look at the way that civilization migrated, if you look at where populations settled, it depended upon where they could get across these rivers. The settlements grew up around the fords, or places where they could then learn to put ferry boats. We just get in our car and go for a drive and never even think about how good it is, the freedom to be able to move. So it's very important that we train ourselves to focus on the good, because biologically we're programmed to look for something that's out of the ordinary or different than we expect. I have a friend who got a dog one time from the rescue shelter, from the pound, and it was a Norwegian barge dog, and I had never heard of the breed Norwegian barge dog. I had no idea what they were all about. And this little dog, it's just a tiny dog. They had it small so they could bring it on the boats with them and it wouldn't require much maintenance. But this little dog was trained to go around the barge as they towed the barge on the canals through Europe. This little dog would go around the barge and it would look at the chocks where the lines were tied, the tow lines and the different lines on the barge. And it was able to look at them, and as long as the line was okay, the dog wasn't bothered. But that dog would go out on a regular basis and make a patrol, and it would go around the barge and it would stop. And if a line started to come loose, the dog would see that the line had changed, that it was slipping on the chalk, that something was different. And the dog would just stand there and bark and yap and yap and yap until a human came along and found out why the dog was concerned and refastened the line to the cleat. So part of us has been trained almost in that mindset, almost as the Norwegian barge dog is that we kind of go around looking for something that's not right. And we have to understand that because life is a matter of attention, what we give our attention to is what we get back. What you give out is what you get back. There's a couple things, and one of them is that, first of all, each and every one of us is tuned a little bit differently. Each and every one of us sees things a little bit differently. I could take 1,000 people and show them the same scene, or play the same piece of music for them, or let them listen to the same talk. Excuse me. And if I had time to go around and ask each of the 1,000 people what their experience was, I'd have 1,000 different experiences. See, there's more going on. There's more going on out around us than we can take in. Our minds can only take in and can only process a little bit of what's out there, and each of us takes in a different piece. This is why, if you've ever been to team building experiences in corporate America, you know, they'd get a group of people together and have them read an article or something, and then get the team together to discuss what they read. And what you find out is that that no one person had it all. That each person saw a different piece, but together the team as a whole was able to see more, a bigger picture than any one person could see. And we used to use that as a training exercise to help people understand the value of bringing a team together, that it let the organization, let the team function in a manner that was better than any one individual team member. There was a synergy that was going on there. So each one of us is experiencing life differently. Each one of us is experiencing life in a unique way. And as I said in the opening treatment, it is for that purpose we have come. We have been created to come here to experience life in a unique way, for each of us to see life in a different way. But because life is done unto us according to our belief, because of what we give out, we get back. Not only are we receiving the information in differently according to the way that we're attuned, according to what we believe and what we're looking for, but as Dr. Holmes would tell us, we're spiritual broadcasting stations. So we're giving off that same energy, if you want to call it that same vibe. You know, that we are kind of tuned to that frequency. You know, so if you listen to the radio. You remember I think it was Ray Stevens had the song "Turn Your Radio On," and listen to the music in the air, and it was an old preacher's sermon. There's so much going on out there. You know, if you turn on the radio and you start to tune the dial, remember the old radios when you actually had a knob and you would tune them, and it starts to go across and you get the little snippets. You might at one end of the spectrum you might have classical music. You know, at another end of the spectrum you might have people talking about art or theater or those kind of things. You might also have people talking about what's going on in the community, or you might tune into a talk show where there's just a lot of yelling going on and a lot of berating and, you know, kind of tearing people down and all that kind of stuff. So you've got this full spectrum of possibilities out there in the radio frequency spectrum, but we're only tuned to one little bit at a time. And what we are tuned to, you know, is that's what we resonate with, that's what we give off, and that's what we bring more back into us. So, excuse me. So if we are geared to look for good, we see good, and the more good we see, the more we get tuned to see good, and the more good we bring into our life. If we are geared to see that which is wrong, we are going to bring more of that into our lives, because that is what we are tuned to. That is what we are giving off. That is what we believe. And this was illustrated in the story of the two men sitting on the front porch on a country road, two Amish men, and a man was driving down the highway, and he stopped and he asked for directions to the town, and the gentleman on the porch says, "Well, that's the next town up the road right here." And the man said, "Well, what kind of people do you expect I'll see there? I'll meet there." And the Amish gentleman said, "Well, what kind of people did you meet at the last place you lived?" And the guy says, "Oh, they're all good and wonderful people, nice and kindly people. They helped one another out. You know, they love to have fun together and to tell a good story and to sing a good song." And the Amish gentleman says, "Well, you'll find people just like that straight ahead." And a few minutes later, another car pulls up. Man asks for directions to the town. The Amishman points to the town. And the fellow says, well, what kind of people will I meet there? And the Amish gentleman says, well, what kind of people were in the last town that you lived in? He says, they were all greedy. They're all mean. They were fighting all the time. They were trying to steal from one another. He says, I didn't like it. I had to leave. And the Amish gentleman says to him, well, he says, unfortunately, he says, you're going to find the same kind of people in the town. And the moral of the story is that, you know, what you expect, that's what you're going to get back. So the glass is half empty, the glass is half full, but it is what we are attuned to. Now, once we understand that life is a matter of our attention, what we give our attention to is what we get back, then we start to realize how important it is to break out of this evolutionary or biological cycle that we're in of training ourselves to see what doesn't work. And now we've got to start to deliberately force ourselves, perhaps at first, train ourselves, but deliberately practice seeing that was good. And Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us how important this is. She said it's almost as if we're silent about the good. You know, the good is all around us and we never talk about it, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, as soon as something goes wrong, the ache or pain in our body or something goes wrong in Washington or whatever, something goes wrong with the car, everybody knows about it. You know, we tell everybody in the world about the problem that we're having, but we're completely silent with regard to the good, you know. Can you imagine if somebody called you on the phone and said, how's it going? And you started to list all the good things that were working in your life, and you said, well, it's great, you know. The electricity's on, the water's running, the car's fine, it's a beautiful sunshiny day, I have my health. You know, if you started to count your blessings, people would say, well, you know, I haven't got time for all that. But that's what we ought to be doing. See, that's what we ought to be doing is we ought to be proclaiming the good when we see it, because that which we give our attention to, that is what we are going to get back into our lives. So what Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us is we need to consider our purpose. We need to consider what we are here for. What is it that we wish to express, to experience, or to enjoy with this life that God has given to us? And she says that probably the best description that we can come up with is that we are all seeking good. Now, in truth, we're all seeking God, but God is such a vague concept to people that by saying I'm seeking my God, it doesn't have enough specific focus for them to move towards it, if you will, to accept more of it. You know, it's like life. Sometimes people would say, well, I want to experience life. Well, we are experiencing life. We're already doing that. We may be experiencing it in what we perceive to be a positive way or a negative way, but we're experiencing it right now. So we have to be a little bit more specific. And Emma tells us that by saying that what we wish to experience is good, well, then it helps us to get experience. So can you name your good? What does your good look like? What does your good feel like? What does your good taste like? Is your good health? Is your good wealth? Is your good relationships, fulfilling activities? What is your good? What is your good? And she says we need to actually say it out loud. You know, you may not want to do this in public, but certainly in private, you want to say out loud the name of your good, you know, and to think about it and to recognize that the good that you are seeking is already seeking you. It has been placed there for you to discover it in your own unique way, for you to find it and for you to experience. So she tells us to consider that there's a good in the universe and I ought to have it. And the name of that good is, and you name it, health, wealth, love, fulfilling activities, relationships, service, you name it. And to recognize that that good already exists. That good already exists and that good is already seeking me. There's good in the universe and I ought to have it. And the name of that good is health. And that perfect health already exists. And that perfect health is seeking me as its outlet, seeking me as its expression, seeking to push forth through my soul into expression in this life. And she tells us that we need to take time to do that. We need to take time very deliberately to stop and think about what is the good that you are seeking, what is the good that is seeking you, and are you willing to say it out loud? I think most of us would say, well, yeah, well, of course, I want health, yeah, and yes, and wealth. I want enough and plenty to do all the things that I want to do, and loving relationships, sure, that'd be pretty good, yeah. But are we willing to say it out loud like we mean it? Are we willing to go stand in front of the mirror and look in the mirror and say it in a manner that we actually believe the person that we see in the mirror? That we actually can look ourselves in the eye and say there's a good in the universe and I ought to have it. And the name of that good is, and that good is seeking me. What we come to recognize when we do this is ultimately we recognize that the good that we're seeking is God. Because God is the source of all things. God is all things in that form, if you wish. Where does health come from? It is the activity of God in our bodies. Where does wealth come from in terms of the resources that we need to do the things that we're here to do? It all comes from God. Who makes the grass grow? Who makes the food grow? Who sends the sunshine and the rain? It is all God. So we start to recognize then that what we are seeking, the good that we are seeking, is not something separate from, apart from, or different than God. Right? It's not like, well, I want a ton of money and God is over there and the money's over here. That's not it at all. Excuse me. I am accepting the resources that are required for the full expression of this life, and that's the reason that I am here. Not to hoard, but to be in that flow of life. I'm seeking the goodness of health to be in that flow of life as the goodness of God's health flows through me. I am seeking the goodness of love because love is the way that we experience God in each other. That which we love, we feel one with, That which we feel one with is experiencing the presence of the divine in that person, in that place, in that thing. We feel it, We feel it sometimes more in certain people or more in certain places, but it is everywhere present, awaiting our recognition. So we must learn to speak out loud the good that it is that we declare already exists, and that it is already seeking us, and we are already seeking it, and we come together in divine union. We come together. And then what Emma Curtis Hopkins tells us is something happens. As we do that, as we start to declare our good and speak our word, what tends to happen is the negative tends to bubble up within us. So immediately as we speak our good and we say, well, the perfect health of God is within me right now, and then I say, well, but what about this tickle in my throat? And what we have to learn how to do is we have to learn how to deny the appearances. As Dr. Holmes would tell us, as long as you have any life whatsoever within you, the perfect health of God is there, and the possibility of full and complete healing exists. So even with the tickle in the throat, even with the cough, it is everything working perfectly. There is health in this body right here and right now, and it is expressing itself to a fuller and fuller degree. So what she tells us to do is we have to learn how to use our affirmations, so that when something comes up that says, oh no, but it's not so, we can use our affirmation, such as, nothing can withstand the inevitableness of God's health. Nothing can withstand the inevitableness of God's health. God's perfect health is flowing to me and through me right now, and nothing can withstand it. And everything else is an appearance that is dissolving into the nothingness. So what happens then, excuse me, what happens to us then is that we are starting to break out of the old mindset, the old way of thinking, of just trying to find out what's wrong, and we are starting to condition ourselves to think in a new way about what is right. And as we start to think about what is right, it's only natural that the old way of thinking comes back in and says, oh, but what about this? And what we have to learn how to do is to dissolve it, if you will, to get rid of it, to say, this is a lie pretending to be the truth. That's the old way of thinking. But the new way of thinking is that there's good. There's much more good than there is not good. And we're going to focus on the good. So what we learn how to do then is we must learn to understand that the good already exists. And we must completely accept the fact that the good is ours to experience, that we have been created to experience the good. The divine did not create us and put the good there and then withhold it from us. It would not mock itself, as the philosopher said. God does not mock its children. God does not mock itself. It has no benefit to itself, if you will. It has no intention of withholding from itself. So it has created us out of itself that we might experience the fullness of this life. We might experience the goodness, and in experiencing the goodness, we bring more good. We create a greater channel for good in this world as we experience the goodness. As we move our mind from what's wrong, we move our mind to what's right. We start to bring more of what's right into this world. I mean, think of all of the good things that have come into being in this world. And think of how many of them came into being by somebody who didn't believe that that they should come into the world, or that they could come into the world. And the great breakthroughs in thinking and the great inventions in thinking were by people who believed, not by people who didn't believe. While the Wright brothers were busy flying their plane, people were still writing articles about how it was physically impossible to fly airplanes. While when the first great steamship was being built in Britain, there were people who were writing articles about how it was physically impossible for a steamship to sail long distances because it couldn't possibly hold enough coal. And nevertheless, the Britannica was in fact sailing great distances and bringing back great cargoes. When Roger Bannister was getting ready to break the 4-minute mile, physiologists were writing papers about how it was physically impossible for the human body to possibly run fast enough to break the 4-minute mile. But once Bannister did it, within a few months' time, other people did it as well. The good comes into the world by people expecting the good. The good does not come into the world by the people who are expecting the not so good. Excuse me. So as we start to train ourselves for that purpose for which we have come, to be God's eyes and ears and hands and feet, an instrument of finding the good that is there, then more and more good enters the world into our experience and through our experience. We start to accept the fact that the good is there, it's ours, but we have to cooperate. We have to name it. We have to declare it. We have to accept it. We have to expect it. And we have to share it. We have to share it. Nothing comes in our lives for us to hold on to it. See? We have to let it go. We have to allow it to come into our lives and to be a blessing in our lives, and we have to allow it to move through us to be a blessing into other people's lives. You know, think about your breath, for example. Think about if you took a deep breath and held it and never let it go. This is my breath. This is my air. I've got it and I'm going to hold on to it. I'm never going to let it go. What would happen to us? Well, of course, we would die. We have to let it go in order to live. We have to receive freely. We have to release freely. We have to find our unique gift, our unique way of seeing the world, our unique way of experiencing God's love. And we have to share that with others who are attuned to that way. We don't have to go out and convert them. We don't have to drag them in kicking and screaming, but we just have to be there to be that instrument of God's love so that others who appreciate that way can benefit and can grow, so that we can be God's instrument of love wherever we go, whatever we do, whomever we see. Oh God, it's good, it's good, it's good. Just go look out the window, it's good. You can see everything is green. You can hear the birds singing. The children are playing. It's good. It's good. And the more we bless it, that which we bless multiplies in our lives. Right? The more we bless it, the more we see it. The more we see it, the more we experience it. The more we experience it, the more of it that there is. You know, sometimes people ask, well, what do we need to do to fix the world? What do we need to do to change the world? And, of course, we're looking at what's wrong. We're looking at what's wrong. And the one thing that we need to do, the one thing that we are programmed to do, and perhaps the one thing that we as human beings are uniquely qualified to do, is to bless the good. To bless the good where we find it. By blessing it, I mean seeing the presence and the activity of God in it. To bless the good. So this week I invite everyone to do something that only you can do. See the world in your own unique way. Think of all of the good that is already there. Think of all of the beauty and all of the joy and all of the love. Think of all of the goodness that's there. And bless it. And bless it. And say, yes, you know. And that's mine. That's mine to enjoy. That's mine to experience. That's mine to see. That's mine to love. The beauty of the sunset, the smile of a child. It's there. See, it's already there. All we have to do is make a conscious effort to see it. So let's let discovering good be our spiritual practice this week. Let's try to catch ourselves as much as possible wherever we go. Let's try to catch ourselves being good detectives, seeing the good, experiencing the good, feeling the good, naming the good. Be willing to sit down in the morning and declare the good that you want to experience that day. There's good in this world for me. There's good in my life. There's good in God's creation. I ought to experience it, and its name is love and peace and health. Excuse me, and joy. We have more than enough people who are willing to sit around and telling us what's wrong. And all they continue to do is to create more of what's wrong. Remember the French saying, the more it changes, the more it stays the same? And if you look at the world around us, the world of effect, it pretty much stays the same. The names and faces change, but the circumstances stay the same. What we want to do is be God's instrument of change, and that change has to start with us. And that change starts by us being willing. We're already able. We just have to be willing to go out and see the good that is already there. So get your little magnifying glass out, get your little Sherlock Holmes hat out, get your little notebook so you can jot it down for yourself and go through life and celebrate the good and say, oh God, yes, this is good. This is good. And you will be that instrument of goodness that you came to be. And so it is.